Montana. I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube, joined by my buddy Patrick McCray and my buddy Gordon, who's holding up a Doc Savage pulp there. Very, very nice. I like it.
Oh, I'm reading. You can just go on without me.
Hey, do right to all and wrong no man, baby.
Mm-hmm.
That comes straight from the 86th.
We're here to discuss 1841 Parallel Time, episode 1213. Gordon, I'm going to start with you. What did you think of, because Bramwell is in this episode, by the way, the opening narration is done by Kate Jackson, who didn't do too many of those, but I love when she does do them. She sounds great.
Here's a bit of trivia. She did none of the 1897 storyline. She did no narrations during 1897.
Oh.
Neither did she do any for the Leviathan storyline.
You got me. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Jonathan Frid's Bramwell Collins?
Well, it's interesting. I think he did. I'm going to ask a question. How old is Bramwell supposed to be in this storyline? Because he's written, to me, he comes off as, Fred is good, but he comes off as like an older man trying to play like a really young dude.
Yeah. I'm going to spot him at 37. I could be off.
Okay, that would fit because Fred was was in his 40s at this time, so
yeah.
You could.
So
he was about 47.
Okay.
Sure. But what did you think of Bramwell Collins, Jonathan Frid's Bramwell?
Well, I think Bramwell as a character is interesting. Collins, if Barnabas was the guy who wanted to fit in with the Collins family, Bramwell is like he's trying to make his fortune. He's just like, screw this. I'm not part of this lottery. He's like
the whole field of Collins's.
Plus he cleaned Morgan Collins' clock in like episode 1203.
Yes. And then they had a duel.
Mm-hmm. Now I have a question about Morgan Collins, and I promise no jokes about his voice. What is up with that dude's wig?
That wig? I think that's his real hair.
Well, to me, it looks like he's got like a wig on top of a construction helmet. It's just his hair looks odd.
Well, he's got it parted down the middle, which is a little weird. We don't see that much. This side of Karelia,
mm-hmm.
and it is a very different hair. It's just a contemporary hairstyle of 1970s, 1971. But both he and Jonathan Frid look like they're trying out for the part of Han Solo.
Yeah, they are.
And of course, Joan Bennett is Chewbacca.
Yeah, because I was wondering, if Harrison Ford used this episode as inspiration for the role, because they do have. But no, I do, and Bramwell is interesting because I think he's got that defiance. He also doesn't give a shit. Excuse my language, but
you can say it's okay.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think especially in this episode, because I actually watched it before we got on. His attitude is basically like, someone I cared about is with somebody else who is a total, who's kind of a total, he's a jerk. I'm amazed that like with all the thing about the lottery that like Gabriel runs off, and I'm amazed that Gabriel didn't just like cold like knock him out, throw him in the room and say, okay, done. Or that the rest of the family is like, you know what? Yeah, let's just shut up, Morgan.
I think you're right. As much trouble as Gabriel is, it's like Gabriel Morgan, Gabriel, but I will keep Gabriel.
And I love how I love how like Bramwell, everything sounds like a sneer.
Well, vocally, Fred is basically doing the anti-Barnabas. Whereas Barnabas had this, as by Fred's own admission, this kind of this fake mid-Atlantic thing where the R's were dropped a little bit and so on and so forth. Here, he's basically going to hit the R's as hard as he can. It's all and he's doing his best to sound really American.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And two, I think with Bramwell here, there's a line that, again, because we get to see Josette as an old woman, something we've never gotten to see before in the series, which is nice. And I love how the actress sounds like Catherine Lee Scott, even though it's not Catherine Lee Scott. But she says something in an episode where she says, "You are your father's son." Well, yeah, Barnabas was his dad, but he's nothing like his dad other than the look. He's his own person. Bramwell is very much his own man, and he really wants no affiliation with the Collinses that live in the great house. This is a complete 180 what we saw him do as Barnabas, and it's really, really good.
It is. Now the fine point in that is because we have not seen Carol.
No.
Guys, I'm sorry, I have to take this. This might be an emergency. I'm sorry.
Okay. But what did you think of Bramwell? Go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, I think Bramwell's an interesting character. It would have been nice if it's one of those kind of what ifs, because at this point the show is coming to an end, and it would have been nice if we could have had more Bramwell, just because I think it's a really interesting take.
Yeah. What did you think of Josette here?
It's
We're going on an adventure.
ooh.
Nice.
I'm right here.
Let's see, Josette is, I think in this storyline, I think it's nice to kind of see a slightly more realistic take on the character.
Yeah.
That it's not as with 1795, the emphasis is more on the kind of the romance, basically. But I think here, because I think this is the episode, and I don't think she's in this particular episode, because 1213 is where Gabriel is supposed to go in the room and he runs off.
Yeah, he ends up escaping the room. But
right.
At the end of the episode, you're right, he escapes the tower room by a blue rope, if you will.
Right. And then, Morgan catches up with him, because in this episode, Bramwell and Daphne hear him, because Barnabas is not Barnabas.
Bramwell.
Bramwell is recovering from his wounds from the duel.
Yeah.
To those who are watching, this is the first time I've done this podcast sober, so bear with me.
A nation more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Patrick, you were saying something about Bramwell.
Everyone's frozen.
But I really like the fact that, for the most part, like we're all familiar with the series from the beginning and what happened in 1795. We're introduced to Josette first as a ghost, and we first meet her. We first meet her as a living person in 1795. I mean, yes. When I first saw the ghost, and Patrick and I were talking about this before we started recording, when I saw the ghost come out the portrait, I swear I see Catherine Lee Scott's face. So when Catherine Lee Scott's character Maggie Evans is kidnapped, I'm not too shocked at this. And you know Barnabas knows Josette when he talks to the portrait. Now, you might not know there was a romance, but you know there's something there.
Right.
And so then when we finally see Josette in this parallel time, 1841, it's just really nice to see. It's so different than what we've seen before. And it's always nice to see something refreshed and something new, even though it's sort of old.
Yeah, and I think too, I think seeing Josette here because it is a short term alternate take, there isn't the sense of in the main storyline, Josette is the woman the great lost love. I mean, we realize it's Angelique in 1840, but for Barnabas, this is who he obsesses on. Here, she's just a matter of fact. It's like she's Bramwell's mom. Yeah. I mean, it's that nice little it's that breath of she's not some kind of abstract. She's a lot more, she's more of a person. Whereas in the main, in the prime timeline, because she's she's a ghost, then she's we meet her, she's basically and it's very clear that like with at least for me in 1795, although there's affection between she and Barnabas, it's more of a business deal than it is an actual love. It would be whereas here there is that kind of well, it's just, oh yeah, Barnabas and I were married, Bramwell's my son, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So she feels a lot more. It's a different kind of character, and it feels less like a variation of the character, more like a character who just happens to have the name Josette.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're quite right. One of the things I was gonna say was that when oh, you're just like your father. Well, it very well could be, because remember, we're dealing with parallel time Barnabas.
Right.
And so we don't know what he was like.
Yeah.
Except that he wasn't a vampire, and he seemed to have a functional relationship that Angelique did not screw up.
Josette touches upon Barnabas very briefly about how he dwelled in darkness, which is cryptic as hell, but I love it. I love the line.
Yeah.
Because it feels creepy. It feels very Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
What did you guys think, and what did you think of Morgan Collins in this episode?
Overbearing, bullying blowhard who's perfectly happy to take advantage of his brother who's suffering from a terrible SUD, and basically kill him off because he's too much of a pain for Morgan to deal with. He's a terrible guy. He's just this. I think he's a selfish bullying prick, in my opinion. I think he's using this as an excuse to get rid of Gabriel for fun.
Yeah, and Gabriel actually, in a way, turns the tables on him emotionally, because even though it's clear they're at the Eagle, Gabriel's drunk and saying, well, I just wanted one more day. And then at the end of the episode, as they're escorting Gabriel in the end, Chris Pennick, who did I don't know if the daytime Emmy was around back then, but he should have gotten it.
Yeah, that was 1974.
Oh, okay, thank you. They should have at least or if it was around, he would have earned it. Kind of looks at Morgan and says, Morgan and Julia, and says, just remember, I'm doing that. Just remember that when I entered in this room, I'm entering it with a sober, even voice, which I don't think Morgan is capable of doing.
I have a funny little story to tell you guys. we were sitting down at our kids' school, getting ready to pick them up, and my wife was listening to music pretty loud, and I put on an episode of 1841 Parallel Time where Morgan Collins shouts, and it went over her music, and I had my phone at half, and she goes, "Who the fuck was that?" But it's really, really cool that I love the dynamic between the family, because when you see Julia go to the old house because they're telling her to, and she decides to go because she knows Morgan and Bramwell will just probably get into an argument anyway. She sees Daphne there, and Bramwell and Daphne have seen, or at least Daphne saw. They both heard Gabriel ride by, which I love the sound effect of the horses. I thought that was cool. That she says that. What's that? Yeah, I really liked it. I liked them. They were cool, and you have this moment where Julie is telling them that Gabriel drawed for the lottery, and he lost. He's running away, and she says about, well, we thought you might have helped him. He goes, I would have helped him, but he didn't stop here. He kept on going, and he tells Julia to have Quentin and Gabriel Quentin and Morgan draw again. Well, it turns out this is the first time Bramwell learns that everybody draws, even the women, and that means Catherine. And the look on Jonathan Fritz's face is really, really good. I mean, he sells it greatly because, I mean, he's in love with Catherine. That's something that's been established in the earlier episodes. And I think what 1841 really pulls off really well is they manage, I would dare say more than any other art, to really keep the love angle going without too much physical contact or all this kissing and mushy stuff, but they keep it going with the look and the jealousy and all. And even Catherine's got some lines that really let you know that she really does love Bramwell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, I mean, they're putting this storyline puts the Wuthering in Wuthering Heights. And I think too, even though it's towards the tail end of the run, we know that in retrospect, within a few weeks, the series is done. And I think they're really good at playing up we're so used to characters operating at a level of, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being high energy, we're used to them being up in 12 and 13. Now I would say they're at like 9 to 10, which is not bad. But I do think that they're really playing up the whole kind of the triangle. And also, I don't know if the actor playing Morgan is doing it deliberately, like he's doing that loudness and that as a deliberate choice, or if he's just doing it because it makes sense to or it makes sense or he just, because I have a hard time believing that he's not doing it without some knowledge. Yeah. Because the actor is actually a very successful New York stage actor, so it's not like you can it's not like he wouldn't know better.
Right.
But I think I think Morgan is just kind of that. He's the kind of guy who loves the sound of his own voice.
Yeah. Do you think they might have, Keith Prentice is who Gordon's talking about. That's who plays Morgan Collins, for those who've never seen Dark Shadows. Do you think they told him, I mean, I'm sure he read the script and figured it out for himself, but do you think they also maybe told him, hey, he loves the sound of his own voice?
Well, knowing the way that the series was produced, I'm not sure how much direction he could have been given.
Right.
Is probably, here's your script. The director would do the blocking and make sure they went through. But by this point, they're all the cast is pretty much a solid unit. Prentice is like one of the only major new actors. I can't see them saying, go broad.
Yeah.
He's probably reading, picking that up, and doing what he thinks is an interpretation with the character. And keep in mind, it's also soap opera, because he might have been going in like, okay, it's easy money. They can't fire me. Let's just go for it. Where someone like Frid knows how to play. He's looking at it and go, okay, this might be Johnny one note, but let's see if I can find some other notes to play around it.
Yeah. He does too. There's some great scenes between him and Keith Prentice, and him and Quentin too. Him and David Selby have obviously been, working together on the series for some time. But I love the scenes between him and Kate Jackson here in the old house, where he's asking Kate Jackson's character Daphne Heritage about, he remembers when she was such a young girl. And he goes, "You're still a young girl to me." She goes, "Well, I'm not. I'm a young woman now." And he goes, "Yes, you are." And you can sort of see like the wheels turning in Bramwell's head, like he's thinking something here, which I love.
To use modern terminology, I think he's thinking, "Oh, okay, I can hit it and quit it."
Yeah.
And it's weird too. That's why I asked about how old he's supposed to be, because if she's say 20 and he's supposed to be 36, 37, it's still a little skeevy, but you could kind of see it work. But because Frid is an older gentleman playing that age, it comes across, and maybe this was intentional, it comes across as even more skeevy. Especially since her approach is, she's not playing it as, oh, I've got a crush on this guy and I'll see if I get him to like me. She's just playing it absolutely like, she even tells Catherine, hey, he seems lonely and he needs a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, she's more just trying to be a good friend to Bramwell, because deep down she knows her sister still loves him. And to give the plot explanation too, their dad, Catherine, and Daphne's father was a doctor, and she learned some techniques from her father and how to bandage people up and stuff. So because Bramwell lost the duel and has a bullet lodged in him, she helps get the bullet out and wrap him up. And she's taking care of him because she doesn't want nothing to happen to him, because she does view him as a good friend. Gordon's right, absolutely right. And I love how he goes, well, don't you have anybody here? Why not just leave? I do like the fact that he's just telling her, you have, basically what he's saying, you have no real reason if you have no real reason to stay here, then honestly just go. But he does tell her that it's no better out there, because we do learn in prior episodes that, Bramwell has been around the world.
Yeah, and I think at this point, the character is just kind of like, the woman I love is with somebody else. My family's involved in this dumb lottery. Maybe the only one he might like is Gabriel with his flask, because everybody loves free booze. So, he essentially lost a duel, and so he's probably like, he's giving a nice 2-fingered salute, and you can all guess which fingers to his family, because at this point he's just like, I'm done. It's to use he just does not give. He just does not care anymore. He's just like, screw this, I'm out of here.
Yeah, he in every way, even though his mother is in the house, Bramwell is very much the lone wolf of the family, or the black sheep, if you will. Even though the Collins family have this whole lottery thing going on, and Bramwell knows all about it, but he doesn't care to participate, because he doesn't care for that family and how they treated him, because they treated him less than. And really, I mean, look, the Collinses have done that before. This isn't the first time. They are a family that tends to turn their nose up at times, and there are characters that do that. But here, they do it to one of their own. And I mean, they've done it in a sense, they've done it to one of their own. And when you watch 1795 and Barnabas marries Angelique, Joshua ain't happy.
Yeah, and it yeah, the Collins family kind of wears its trauma on its sleeve. You know,
Yeah.
they are um they're willing to really scapegoat anybody.
Yeah.
If it means keeping that particular dynamic going. And I think Bramwell's like it's kind of like the outsider perspective. You know, Barnabas he really is an outsider because he's a vampire and he's trying to fit into this kind of weird little dynamic. And he comes as an outsider from his original family because he's got an uncle who's more like his brother. Um, his best friend is there, David. Um, and there's a sense of, this marriage to Gisette is really important. And he does care about her, but I think it's more of a, he was engaged to her, um, and Angelique comes along and, he's got to do this. Whereas here, it's a lot more, hey, Bramwell's like, I tried to do, he actually did something.
Yeah.
Barnabas was, for lack of a better word, he was kind of like, he was Joshua's tool, for lack of a better word. He was basically a placeholder. He was basically that thing for his father to go into business. Bramwell is just like, he's there because he's an outsider because he actually went out, got out of the family, saw different things, and now he's like, this doesn't make sense. No. And so I think that Bramwell is kind of the outsider, as he's an outsider because he has a broader perspective. And I think the fact that, like, in that scene with Kate Jackson, where he's, it may be skeevy, but he's also saying, hey, look, you're better than this.
Yeah. And that's something when Catherine gets brought to the great house, she yells at her sister, like, you're married to Morgan, not me. And I love that line because it's so true. Like, hey, Morgan might tell you what to do, but he ain't telling me what to do. And it's because, they don't want any more buddy exposed to plague. Well, really, Julia Collins, who's played by Grayson Hall, went to the old house and she sort of spread it around. Now, I love the fact that Grayson Hall finally gets to play a Collins, Julia Collins. What did you think of that, Gordon?
Well, I think, she plays a character named Julia. She's not bad. I think, though, here's the thing with the 1841 parallel timeline that I think can kind of get lost, which is you're dealing with, it's to show that at this point they either know the end is coming or they kind of see the writing on the wall and realize, hey, we can't go any further.
Yeah.
The writers are kind of like, okay, we can't do 1897 level stuff. We either don't have the time, we don't have the budget, or the will. Dan Curtis is off doing Night of Dark Shadows, reading Winds of War and Warm Remembrance, and thinking, hey, this is what I really want to do. The cast is, except for maybe Keith Prentice, the cast is like, hey, even though time's up, we're going to really need to focus and make this as good as we can be. I think Julia comes across as, it's like, I wonder, it feels like she doesn't quite fit, but mostly because that whole family just feels very fragmented in a way that, the 1840 prime timeline, that's a family that's not only affected by trauma, they're wearing it on, Daniel's mad. Gabriel is, he's faking being disabled in order to get his father to love him. Edith's an alcoholic. The family is very much, Quentin is kind of the, okay, I'm going to go do stuff in the garage, except the stuff in his garage projects are all dealing with magic and time staircases. I think here the family is a lot more, because they're dealing with a different kind of curse. Yeah. They're wearing it on their sleeves, and I think Julia is kind of the, go along to get along. In fact, I watched a couple of episodes leading up to this, and at the scene where I think everyone reveals the slip that they have. When Gabriel realized, hey, I'm the one who picked the slip with the X. I don't remember Julia either taking one or saying like, oh yeah, I've got a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, I don't need the first person they show is Flora, is Judd Bennett. And they do this over the camera shot of her paper because Quentin, David Selby's character, wanted to go first, and Flora said, no, I'll go first. And basically what this is the head of the household went first. But I think you might be right. I might have to go back and watch the lottery draw.
Because that would, I think that adds another layer of mind messery to the deal, because then it's not Gabriel it's Julia's kind of backing up Morgan. But the other thing too is that Gabriel is the one who basically makes the assumption, and it gives him a little bit more of a layer of character where, he knows he's going in, but he's putting up the drunk guy front so that he can have one more day before going into the room. And I wonder, and Julia, I think it's kind of hard because it's, for what, I wonder what her Grayson Hall's role in the main story, whatever is, she's kind of the helper, so to speak, whether she's Julia, Magda, the Countess Dupre, she's always playing kind of the helper. I mean, even in 1970 Parallel Time, she's the maid who gets killed by Julia Hoffman, which, here it's kind of like, okay, she's like the cousin or the sister, but she's not really given a lot of agency and a lot of she's there because there's an actress there who can play her. She's not a bad character. It just doesn't, I think, I have to be honest, 1841 Parallel Time is not really my favorite arc of the whole series. So part of it, I think, they know their ending, so they're trying to do the best they can to reach the finish line. They do it, and they do it with style and grace. But it's one of those that, and it's too bad we lost Patrick, because I'm sure that as I'm saying all this, he would jump in with his usual, no, here's why 1841 Parallel Time matters. But I do think Julia Collins is, if she did pull that slip and I missed it, it's one thing, but it kind of shows that, like, she's like, hey, you know what, I'm not going to say, hey, Gabriel, let me open my paper first. She's more like, you know what, I'm on Team Morgan in this regard. Let's just throw Gabriel into the room, just like this cat. If it doesn't be quiet, hush.
I think with her slip unveiling, it's so quick is what it is, because I do remember her having a slip in her hand and like open it, and that is the weirdest part about the lottery drawing isn't who gets it. It's they start off showing Elizabeth, or sorry, Flora's, Judd Bennett's character, then David Selby's Quentin Collins, then Morgan goes, and then Julia goes, and then the last two are Catherine and Gabriel. And Julia's is so quick, it's like, well, that was, so Gabriel's sort of like, oh, it's between me and her. And then when she unveils hers, she hugs Morgan, and Gabriel's all excited because he thinks, oh, she got the X, and no, he got the X. But, which is a great scene, very well acted and filmed. I loved how it's done. But it's her unveiling is so quick that it's sort of like an afterthought,
Yeah, and I still think it would have been even more fun and more dramatically satisfying if the family just said, you know what, forget this lottery. Morgan's the pain. let's just throw him into the room and be done with it, you know. And then, you know, the ghost of Brutus Collins comes out, looks at Morgan, and is like, you know what, there's nothing I can do that's going to hurt you. You know, I'm breaking the curse right now. I mean, hell, you know, dealing with you is like Club Med. The rest of your family is probably just glad you're in here. You know, there's nothing I can do. So, yep, curse lifted. I'm out of here. I'm going to go on all my children.
There you go. You know what was weird with Julia Collins? Like when Lamar Trask comes through 1841 parallel time, he dies. And her and Flora have no problem burying this body. I mean, a stranger they didn't know, right? But when Kendrick Young's sister dies, they have all sorts of problem touching the body, let alone burying it, and they get Morgan to do it. I'm thinking, wait a second, y'all had no problem burying a corpse early.
Well, we're only told that they didn't have a problem.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that you know, knowing Morgan, that if we had seen that scene, they'd have a problem, and Morgan would be all, oh well, you know, here's a stranger. Why don't we just, you know, I don't know, let's just throw him in a ravine. And they're like, oh, you know what? We just don't want to deal with this guy. We'll take care of it, and fight the temptation to throw Morgan in with the body. Maybe they put they break the body up in the old house. It's like, hey Morgan, can you hold the body up against the wall so that we can kind of put bricks around him? And Morgan's like, no, I see what you're doing. Not going to happen. Because that would be really fun to have Morgan and Trask walled up. And yeah, this podcast has taken quite a darker turn, hasn't it, folks?
What they really wanted to do is they wanted Morgan to carry the body toward Widowsill. That way they could push Morgan off with it.
Yeah, Morgan Collins is just like a good character idea, but not really, you know, I think the actor oversells it.
Yeah. I really like that him and Jonathan Fred, Keith Prentice, are great together. I mean, you really love their heat that they have for each other because it feels so real, and they really sold it well. I give Keith Prentice a lot of credit, even though he is loud in the role, but I do believe it's on purpose to a degree because he knew the character loved the sound of his own voice, like you alluded to. I love Kate Jackson's character, but I love the fact that she's so very nice. The most we ever see her really sort of somewhat be sinisterly evil is when she's a ghost, and she still turns out to be nice. I always got the sense that Julia Collins was supposed to be something a little more as I'm watching these episodes. It feels like Julia was supposed to be another heel at times in this. Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
Well, it's one of the kind of hard things about the storyline is that they don't have the time to, you know, another episode or two might have helped clarify her, you know, her role and might have made her a heel. I think it's one of the tough things because it's so close to the end. And I'm sure that, like, if Patrick, you know, were here, he'd be talking about how when he did his you know, bulk run, when he saw it all, and that by this point he was tired, and it's like let's you know, it kind of, it's a coda, so it really doesn't quite fit, you know, because dynamics, you know, with 1840 you get to Elizabeth, you know, Stokes, Barnabas, and Julia come back. Elizabeth's like, hey, we're gonna go watch Louis. Watch Roger, you know, he's giving a presentation in Boston. Maybe, you know, he'll do his parlor trick of crushing glasses. There's a nice kind of end to it. This is more of like a coda, and it's kind of like hey folks, this is what would have happened if none of this ever happened. And this is one of those storylines that, had the series continued and had this been a longer, it might have been a little bit more focused on like what that would have honestly been like. And so I think Julia Collins would have probably been more of a heel, or at least someone we don't quite trust. But Morgan, the hair and the voice, and every time, like I wish that every episode had a scene where Bramwell beat the crap out of Morgan Collins, because in that he's just, I don't know, maybe the directors was like, hey, Keith, we'll give you a few extra bucks if you talk a little bit more loudly, and hey, if you can be a little bit more snide towards this particular actor, yeah, we'll let you out a few minutes early. But I think it's, this is a family where it's not the, I mean, if you remove the supernatural elements, this is still a messed up family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because long before we see a ghost or anything, even though we hear that the house is haunted for Maggie in the very first episode, or the chain, you'll hear you talk as if the chains were rattling. That's what Victoria says they're. But here's the thing: it's like the family's pretty messed up because you have Roger up at the old house arguing with Elizabeth. Oh, you shouldn't be inviting her, and he's meaning Vicky. It's just like Roger is one of the most, again, first really messed up characters you meet. But then there's Bert too, and then there's Sam Evans. I mean, there are very, very interesting characters throughout Dark Shadow's history, where it's just like there's this messed up Collins, there's this person who's associated with the Collins family who's messed up because of the Collins family. Mm-hmm. It's like, Jesus Christ.
And it's I know Louis Edmonds comes in later as the ghost of Brutus Collins, but you kind of wish you were playing like the patriarch, just even if it's just like, because I could see Edmonds playing it as, hey, geez, not hey, geez, but what is this? We got to, let's not do this lottery. It's stupid. We've been doing it for generations. Who cares? Morgan, knock it off before I do pull a Bramwell Collins on you. It's, but I think that, yeah, it shows that even if there's no vampire, that Barnabas, even though Barnabas is the center of the Dark Shadow story, you take Barnabas out of it, you've still got enough drama and enough of conflict where, I don't know, you could say that this is an entirely new show at this point, but you're kind of saying no matter what, the Collins family is messed up.
Yeah. I think what 1841 does really well, though, too, it doesn't try to imitate anything that we saw supernaturally before. It doesn't try to have a vampire. It doesn't try to have a werewolf. We have a room where you have to draw from a lottery. One of the Collins family members have to draw and spend the night in that room and both survive and be completely sane. It's something very fresh and new for Dark Shadows that they hadn't attempted yet, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and go ahead, Patrick.
I'd say, no, it's something unpredictable. Yeah. But, in the end, it's right.
Yeah. What did you think of Kate Jackson's Daphne Heritage, Patrick?
That's a tough question because she seems largely the same, or the differences are so subtle. I mean, I think maybe one has a little bit more of a sense of vendetta and one is a little purer, I think. They are not characters that stand out in my mind particularly, as being sharp, distinct, motivated characters who I can describe, really quickly. They're kind of like some of the characters in the new Star Wars trilogy, or in the prequel trilogy, where I know that Mike Stacklasa at Red Letter Media asked people to describe those characters without giving their names or their jobs, and they were just at a loss. And I mean, very pretty, little generic. It's more interesting to see how lascivious Frid is in dealing with her. I mean, when it cuts away, you guys may have talked about this, but when it cuts away, I thought they were gonna, that when it came back, they were gonna be in bed. I didn't realize how much you'd grown up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'd actually remarked to Joel that Frid at that point, that Bramwell's attitude seems to be he could easily hit it and quit it.
Yeah.
Sure, and
and also
at Stokes.
Yeah, and also keep in mind too, Kate Jackson only been on the show for a year, so she's kind of in a similar position to say David Selby was, except that had this gone on further, I'm sure there would have started writing her a little bit more in that develop.
Yeah,
where
I mean, and Kate Jackson in general is that at this point in the earlier than this point in the series, you could see Curtis, casting in substitutes for the people that he was losing. He wrote in Kathy Cody, I feel like, or cast Kathy Cody because she was going to be the new blonde in case Nancy Barrett went somewhere, and he needed a new brunette. And that to me is clearly what's happening. So that's largely what my feelings on her. Jewel, what do you think of her as a character?
I really like her here because she is again someone else's sister, and I get that it does sort of feel similar. I'm not saying it doesn't, but what I like about her is she's so innocent to the fact of what Bramwell's doing, what Bramwell's hitting on her. She's like just completely, it goes over her head, which is believable. Kate Jackson, I think that's the greatest thing about the actors on Dark Shadows. Not only was the writing believable, but the actors and actresses were too, going off of each other. Sure. So when Bramwell just flat out pretty much hits on her, it just goes over her head. And she is, like Gordon was saying too, she's there as a friend. She's not there to hook up with him. She's just there. Yeah. She's legitimately concerned as a friend, as any friend would be. And it's like, but there's Jonathan Frid's, and you could see Jonathan Frid's Bramwell, the wheels are turning in his head like, oh, I know what I can do.
She's a woman now. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's really, really, I know it doesn't seem like much of a scene, but it's a really, really good scene between a great actor and a great actress.
It is well acted. It's naturalistic. It's relaxed. Frid, I'm gonna guess, is having a lot of fun playing Bromwell. I think he is really enjoying what he's getting to do, because he's getting to play a virile, normal, leading man, bad boy leading man. And I don't get the idea. He was playing monsters. He was playing Caliban and Gloucester, and or he was playing detectives or something like that in plays. But I don't see a lot of rippling, broad-chested leading man type parts. And I can tell you that every actor who finds themselves sort of pigeonholed in the more interesting parts because they're more interesting actors longs to play a normative leading man. And so Frid's enjoying the opportunity of basically saying, Mr. Selby, Mr. Pennick, let me show you how it's done. Mm-hmm. And giving us his best Burke Devlin.
Yep. Do you think when Gabriel leaves the tower room and heads into the Eagle, we see Morgan come in and he's like, I just needed my day of grace. How long were you given Gabriel before you kind of figured He's up to something.
Oh, that's an interesting question. How long would you give him?
I didn't believe one word he said, but what I was giving him, because he was going back with him. I'm thinking, nah, I'm giving him at least, let's say, 15 minutes in the room, which I think he spent a little longer than that. So
it's like one of those super hot potato chip challenges.
Yeah.
How long can you eat it? How long, can you do the 5 minutes with no water or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah. Gordon.
Well, I think he might have been putting his porn stash there, so he probably could go a while.
Now, speaking of which, do you notice when Barnabas or Bromwell's in bed, how small Jonathan Frid's mouth is?
Yeah.
Go back and look. It's tiny. It's smaller than Nancy Barrett's. It's the littlest mouth I've ever seen. It's like he had just had some amazing sweet tart or something. He looks like an anime character. Go back and look. That's all. That's my only.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. The way he was shot kind of made him. I think is there a way to kind of say, let's make him physically distinct from Barnabas, because otherwise,
hairdo.
Yeah, hairdo and mouth.
I think that's the thing too. Like when you're having Jonathan Frid play a completely different character for the first real time in the series that isn't named Barnabas Collins, that it isn't a vampire. Well, we got to have him look a little different. And
Drink the mouth, Frid. Drink the mouth. It'll make they won't even know it's you. It's like the domino mask.
Like that's the thing. Like me and Gordon were talking about Josette, and I want to get your thoughts on that too, Patrick. What did you think of Josette here?
She was old. And she was Josette. It was I mean, on one hand, it's satisfying to see. It's a little bit of a I look like Rob Reiner and I sound like B. Arthur. It's satisfying to see a Josette who survived and who has a sense of wisdom and again is like someone connected to this family but is from the real world and isn't some histrionic jerk. So that was nice. It felt like kind of going home.
Yeah. Could you see, like, instead of them casting an older actress to play Josette, if Catherine Lee Scott would have stuck around or got to stick around and put on a wig, put old makeup on her, and she plays Josette?
I think it would have been ludicrous. I think it would have been a farce. I think the fact that they didn't do that, and they did, because then all it is us looking at old age makeup. I mean, it's kind of like then that incredibly, necrotic, kind of cancerous, lumpy landscape they stick on Thayer David. Unless you're dealing with a Dick Smith level of age makeup on someone, which, there's nothing that would justify doing that. It's just cheaper to get an older actress. To me, it was one of those realistic things the show ever did.
Yep.
Just get somebody who's that age, who can do the Catherine Lee Scott thing, and let them do it.
If you go listen, she has a voiceover. The actress who played Josette has a voiceover in her debut episode on the show. Listen to her voiceover and listen to her speak as Josette. It's two completely different voices. And I love it. It's very, very good. Gordon?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as we were talking about before, Josette is a lot more realistic. If they had put Catherine Scott in, it's playing up the Josette as this ideal, this grand love, the myth of dark shadows here. Because we don't have that supernatural element, Josette is an actual real person. And I think putting Catherine Lee Scott in it would have been really it would have been too obvious, too blatant, and it would not have fit. It would be like, Patrick just said he looks like Rob Reiner and sounds like B. Arthur. It would be like if Patrick would have said, well, I look like B. Arthur and sound like Rob Reiner. It just would not fit.
It And to me, it was a very respectful move of the audience.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to pretend like this is real life, and this is an actual older actress.
It's like 1841 parallel time kind of says, hey, look, even without all the supernatural stuff, the Collins family is messed up.
Yeah.
The one thing I always kept in mind going into 1841 when I first watched this was William Holland Head's Loomis book. And so I kept thinking, well, if we're getting a Bramwell, are we getting a Josette? Because it said in his book he married Josette, that Barnabas married Josette. So I always kept that in mind going into this when I first watched it. So when I saw Josette, I'm thinking, holy shit, there's Josette.
That's true.
Which is so good. I mean, as a fan, I appreciate it because it's something. Dark Shadows was always full of fun surprises. Even if you might have suspected something, it's really cool to see something so new, even though it's a character we knew from before.
Yeah.
But is there anything you guys want to add?
I'm good. I am sated.
Yep. I don't think there's much to add, except just a reminder that Morgan Collins, they should have just locked him in the room. There wouldn't be much of a storyline, but it'd be like, yeah, you're a pain in the butt. Let's just lock you there.
Morgan is such a pain in the butt. I almost would have enjoyed just seeing, 3 weeks of the Collinses sitting around reading the funny papers and enjoying themselves and chatting about life and playing games of whist. And
yeah, that would have been,
okay with that. Let's just see them enjoy themselves for a little bit.
Guys, so I've already watched episode 2 of The Prisoner. Really good. So before we go, when's the next time you guys want to do episode 2 of The Prisoner?
Whenever you want. Whenever you do
Whenever I want. Gordon, what's your schedule, buddy?
I am. Let's see. I'm free. Can we do Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah.
That way I'll know not to work myself, so that I end up falling asleep in the chair and having Patrick call me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I do have a podcast, don't I? That way I know to take a nice nap and then, have a full pot of coffee, add a little, grab one of Gabriel Collins' flask, add a little special something.
Gordon, I really have to go to the bathroom.
Okay, let's end this.
Guys, have a great night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.